If you're not aware, I've been doing a Commanders in Conflict style mini tournament every Sunday for the last 4 weeks, and it's been really fun. However, we've run into a few issues. There are some issues that have cropped up along the way, and I think I'd just like to go through them with you now, brainstorm them, and talk about like possible ways we could improve the overall experience of these World War Arena style tournaments. So the first issue we ran into is the only scenario out of the 3 that I personally think is any good is Across the Rhine. And I think the reason why Across the Rhine is really good is because there's so much open space and there's so many like variety of terrain types that you find that action is continuous throughout the entirety of the game. There was only one game in the last World War Arena week 4 between Seagull and Dankus where it was a bit of a stalemate to begin with and neither player was making a push or moving. But apart from that, every other game has been beautiful, nice and smooth and fluid. Now Sonnenblum, which is like the Libya one, this one, has issues as well. The 3 victory points is Malta, this state here, Gabes I think it is, and then Benghazi. Gabes is a good one because it's just desert, so it's easy to take back and forth, and it has a really good intense multiplayer experience as you see a nation take a state back and forth over and over again. However, the other 2 are an entrenchment nightmare. Malta, once you take it, it's almost barely impossible to take back. And also Benghazi is a nightmare too because you got to get a full encirclement, which is difficult because the mountains and the hills. It just makes things really tricky. And when it becomes stale and predictable, it's just not very fun view or a good experience. The third one, Noshi Ron, which I'm just going to call the Pacific map, is the worst one of the lot. It's so boring. Oh, it's so boring. It always descends into one big naval battle. Whoever wins that naval battle tends to dominate the map as a whole. And then you get naval invasions. The problem with naval invasions in HOI4 is they take ages to plan. So therefore, there's a lot of waiting around, sitting on your hands and nothing to talk about. And it just gets kind of boring. The only fun part of the map is this bit here, this big strip of Indonesia here. But landing in here is a nightmare too because of lack of ports. And you have to fight through jungles, which is difficult terrain, which makes it less clutch and less interesting. And it just becomes a very slow grind fest. It's just not a very good, fun experience. The Rhineland map is the winner of the 3 because it makes constant action and you very rarely have downtime periods. But luckily, players don't have constant action because the actual Rhine River, which is where it's all about, does provide a decent defense between the 2 factions. The 2 issues with Across the Rhine are 1, making a navy on this map kind of feels like a bit of a waste. So most of the naval factions never really get seen very frequently, but naval invasions are possible. The other problem with this map too is Western Germany, the air zone is way too big. It kind of dominates the entirety of the battlefield. Because remember, most of the battles happen around the Rhine River. So if you look at the Western Germany, it basically consumes almost half the battlefield of the map. It's way too big. It needs to be split into 2. There needs to be like a Western Germany here, and then a Western Germany here. You know, it needs to be split into three parts just to once again add that little bit of flexibility to Air Force. And to be fair, nerf Air Force, but I think one for certain needs to be changed is how the industry works and the preparation phase. So the preparation phase is a full year period where players get to build up, select national focus and develop their industry there before they go to war against the Axis power, which they play 18 months at war. The issue is the first 6 months are so boring. So in that case, I think the easy fix, the big fix, is you make the preparation phase 6 months instead of 12 months. Now, that's not an easy change because you need to reduce the time of practically every single focus in game. And so in that case, what we're looking at here, so 5, we're looking to remove about 15 days, 10 days from the main country focuses. And then for the industry focuses, we're going to have to remove 20 days probably from each of the industrial focuses as well. Once again, just for the sole purpose of speeding things up a little bit. Another downside of having a shorter preparation phase is going to be less production, there'll be less divisions, or there'll be less action when the war kicks off. So to balance that out, what you'd have to do is up production by like 50% for the first 6 months. You basically say 50% bonus to factory output, 50% bonus to construction speed. That would hopefully result in the games getting to action significantly quicker. Yeah. I also would stick to my previous idea of meaning they can't select more than one industrial focus back to back in a row because it just makes a boring game. Secondly, as well, the civilian factories are less valuable than the military factories. Military factories give production immediately. Civies kind of like you make them to make more mills in the long run. So to create a different style of gameplay, where it's a rush gameplay, which you focus towards mills early, where you can move a long game, attrition style warfare, where you can aim towards civvies, you need to be giving more civvies with each individual one of these focuses. It sounds like counterintuitive because civilian factories cost more than mills in standard HOI4. Remember, this isn't a standard HOI4 game. This game goes on a lot longer than normal. So in this case, the amount of civilian factories that need to be given through these focuses need to be double. This will give 6, this will give 12, and this one will give 24. How do you think about that? You're probably thinking that's way too many civilian factories. That might be the case. It might need some tweaking. It might need some adjusting. But the idea behind it is by going for the civilian factory ones, you're aiming towards making a long-term game economy instead of a short-term game economy to try and play different play styles. Instead of just the game playing out the same way every single time, I want to see games that basically try and go the full game by being weaker at the very beginning, and therefore later in the game you get significantly stronger from building off the back of your civilian factories, like to encourage different play styles. All right, so what is the meta of the Allies? The most popular path the Allies always do is the Soviet Expeditionary Force and the 5th Guard Tank Army, which I think for the most part are really cool because they do two things. They allow you to have heavy tanks, have them significantly cheaper, and also allow you to get free extensive conscription as well as a mechanized army. And then you end up with no step back, which gives loads of combat bonuses as well, which is great. And also you've got red pilots as well, which is universal for the Soviet Union making planes. The second most popular one, probably the most popular one, is the US Army 12th Army Group. It gives lots of infantry bonuses, and the big red one, which allows you to have a decent tank division. Giving CAS as well, giving loads of free artillery as well. Basically, it's a focus towards having a strong infantry force. Finishing it up with Arsenal of Democracy, which gives a really big buff to production focus. My mentality isn't to nerf stuff that's OP. And I established that Smoke and Ashes, 500 pieces of artillery, is really OP. I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is some of the others are just not very strong at all. So for the most part, I think those two paths, the 5th Guard Army and the 12th Army Group, don't need to be changed. Because I think for the most part, they're both very strong. And I think it's just important that we buff other areas too. So we've got US Marine Corps. All right, so what does it give? It gives Marines, gives infantry, reduced training time, supply consumption reduction, gives island hopping bonuses, gives tactical bombers cheaper, and then gives a bonus to, is that Navy? Navy entrenchment speed, for instance, and special forces modifiers. The biggest issue with this path is there's nothing really here that's particularly strong. 100 medium airframe bombers is kind of decent, but to kind of go with the idea of long-range island hopping, which is kind of Pacific idea of a Pacific fleet, I think what it needs to do is it needs to give more ranged tactical bombers. So I think what I would probably do here is give a 20% boost to tactical bomber range. This one needs to be replaced because it's just too bad. It's just too bad. So I would probably give something like a 20% bonus to special forces attack to incentivize that use of using those tactical bombers. So it's kind of like control the Navy, control the fleet, have access to Marines, have range for your bombers overall. And then to top that off as well, give special forces that buff, which is all what it's about in this focus tree. This one needs to be changed as well. This is something that a player would never get to take advantage of in a typical game. I think that this needs to be replaced with like a 20 width amphibious tank division to take an actual advantage of it. Reducing the cost of it is just not worth its time overall. But once again, this will give an incentive to go for this path for the advantage of range, special forces attack. But the idea is instead of making a full army of infantry, which is this path here, this will deal with giving smaller number of divisions with specific focus on special forces that kind of making pushes on the front line itself. Okay, next up, the next path that no one goes for is the 3rd Shock Army. I think this is pretty interesting because it gives the ability to gain paratroopers, CAS, as well as armored trains. And one little hidden secret is if you've already got armored trains research, this gives 100 armored trains, which is fantastic. That means you don't have to make any trains for the rest of the game. I like this one, giving 5 12 width militia divisions. If you could double that to like 10, and the idea behind it is you go for this focus and it fills out your front line for you. I think overall, the issue with paratroopers is you're only really able to do them once. And then after that, you kind of lose so many paratroopers or lose so many transport planes and you're not able to do it again. I think overall, it needs like a reduction to the cost of paratrooper planes. I'm not even sure that's it. You're able to do that in HOI4. But if you can make paratrooper planes, transport planes 50% cheaper with this focus, for instance, that would actually make it way more viable. I like the idea of this part of the focus because it's less about defending and it's more about offensive warfare. I suppose in all fairness, this could give a bonus to speed as well. So the idea is basically this is an attacking force that doesn't have to worry about air power and armored trains. And it gives a bonus to paratroopers overall as well. See, I feel like this is a really good path already, but people haven't really not taken fully advantage of it yet, because it just simply is. Other focuses on other paths are just way too strong. Anyway, now we're moving on to the Commonwealth path, which, once again, it's another one of those paths where I feel like is less taken advantage of. And I think the reason why is I think some of the other paths are just stronger. Anyway, let's look at these one. The 8th Army Commonwealth. So it gives you access to 220 width infantry, 200 small planes. So a lot of people would go for this one for the air superiority. Tank busters, apparently this one's bugged because it doesn't actually give you cheaper anti-tank. I like the idea behind it though. You're gaining air superiority, you're gaining dominance on the ground from anti-tanks. It's like a bit like a control build. It's basically saying, if you're going for tanks, I'm going to go for this build to try and deny you the tanks, which I think is a kind of a cool concept. So it is kind of a focus towards gaining intelligence, gaining an air force, denying tanks, and kind of gaining the ability to have paratroopers. So there's definitely a focus towards planes and defensive warfare. I think the issue with this is the anti-tank gun here only gives 100 of them, where for instance the smoke and ashes gives 500. So this needs to be increased from 100 to at least 300. I feel like agencies are really underwhelming as well. But I'll be honest with you, it creates the intelligence for free and it gives you a +1 operative slot. I suppose the only downside is you don't get to build the network immediately because you have to work down the focus path for that. I suppose the only issue with this path is that it gives you planes, but it doesn't make the planes cheaper. You gain 200 planes a bit, so it's more of a rush build. With red pilots, you get it over time because the planes are overall cheaper. Maybe you would add loads of entrenchment with this as well, because it's a focus towards defending against tanks, but gaining air superiority in the long run. Tank hunters will give you an entrenchment bonus as well to stack with your grand battle plan. So the idea is this is a super defensive build, for instance. Basically a combination of intelligence, air superiority, paratroopers, as well as tank hunters to try and build it and dig in as much as possible. This one is really bad. It makes supply construction faster and railways construction. No one ever does this, so this one is completely useless. This one is really good. 1,000 free trucks for free. What this does for you is it allows you never have to build any trucks the entire game. This is something you don't have to forget about. So I think this is definitely underrated. Shore bombardment plus 15%. That's really bad. You'll not gain any extra shore bombardment from this because there's a maximum cap anyway. Together Victory gains you mechanized infantry. Okay, both of them do that. And it gives you ticking weekly manpower. If you could increase that to 2,000, that would be really decent. I suppose what you could do with this one is maybe replace the maple leaf route with maybe like 1,000 support equipment. And then what you could do then is add logistical teams onto all your tanks. So this would be focused towards armored warfare and supply reduction. It gives you maintenance companies for free. The first tech, the first one for free. It gives logistical companies the first tech for free. And it also gives you 1,000 support equipment for free too. And the final one gives you planning speed and artillery attack, which is also a really weird one as well, because there's no reference to artillery in any of this. I'm trying to keep it as a theme to keep it all related. I don't like it when just one of the focuses do something completely different compared to all the others. You know what? I actually know. I think for the most part, this would be kind of cool if it gave like 1,000 free medium tanks. Now, hear me out. I know what you're saying. You're going to say 1,000 free trucks, 1,000 free support equipment, 1,000 free medium tanks, and you probably think to yourself, Dave, hang on a minute, no, that's just too much free stuff. But the idea behind this Canadian First Army is the Canadian First Army is about rushing. Maybe 500, then 500, yeah, 1,000's too much. 500 free medium tanks, really shitty M2 grants or something like that, or M3 grants, whatever. And the idea is this path is about rushing and doing as much damage as quickly as possible. 500 free medium tanks here, 1,000 free support equipment, and free maintenance and free logistics. Yeah, that's what I would do for that. Let's look at the axes real quick. So the popular paths for the axis that I feel like are really good is the Panzer Group West. And the reason why is people love the heavy Tiger tank path. Gives you options for 2 width motorized so you can rush. The Tiger tank, on the other hand, gets you dig in, gets you more digging up potential here because you've got army fuel reduction and supply reduction. Entrenchment speed, so you can dig into your victory points. So you rush to the victory points, you dig into them, and then you build entrenchment. This gives you a bunch of equipment for free, which I suppose is just universal. You can use it for anything. So it's got attack and defense capabilities. It's basically the jack of all trades. It does a bit of everything. And it gives you a light aircraft research. It also gives a 50% boost to army XP gain, which I suppose is really good for rushing the doctrines, I suppose, which is kind of cool. Anyway, let's talk about the 4th Army then. So I wouldn't change Panzer Group West. It stays the same. We've got the Volks Grenadier Division, decent infantry. 20 width armor divisions, kind of small. Gives towed anti-air, which apparently this is bugged. Apparently it doesn't actually give you cheaper anti-air, which is annoying. So it's kind of a control the skies defensive kind of build, isn't it? You also get the ability of the Singing Dora, which reduces which gives you a railway gun. Nice. Makes medium tanks cheaper, so you're playing kind of a long game. Oh, I like this a lot. It's about playing the long game. So instead of getting lots of free stuff immediately, you play the long game by getting planes, you get anti-air to deny enemy air, you get a tank division that's not the best, but it can be improved upon later on. What I would like to see with this one that would work out quite clever, the Luftwaffe defense units gives also fort construction speed as well. So this is all about defense, playing defense over the long run. This one doesn't need a lot of adjustments because I've seen quite a lot of players do the 4th Army because they want to focus towards air. Yeah, for the most part, that's what I would do. I'd give fort construction bonus to kind of like incentivize defensive plays. I'd also give tank destroyers a cheaper tank destroyers overall. For the most part, this is actually quite a strong path. It's kind of like a more defensive Germany, where this is more of an offensive Germany. So it's kind of a bit of both. Next up, what we've got, we have, what does it do? It gives you a light tank division that's not very good. 224 widths, which is decent. Gives you 200 planes, so it's kind of an air build for the Italians. Gives you tankettes, gives you a 10% reduction on light tanks. That needs to be at least 20%. Speed for research plus 15%. That's not very good either. Yeah, this needs to be like, maybe this gives you 1,000 light tanks to make it more interesting. Colonial irregulars. I think this needs to be increased to 10. Just once again, the same thing as before. It gives you enough infantry to fill out the front lines. It's something less to worry about. But for the most part, this is actually a strong path because it gives tanks, aircraft, and a decent mix, as well as battleships as well. I think the only issue with this path that I can see is I think it needs to give you more light tanks to incentivize light tank play. Next up, the Army of Poe. So it gives you motorized, gives you a speed boost. So this is you can see it's leaning to more of a rush build. Gives you hit chance for your ships and 10 submarines compared to the 20 submarines you get for Germany. Oh, it's not very good. Coastal defense, that's so bad. Truck cheaper 5% and fighters cheaper 5%. That's not very good either. Okay, there's a reason why no one does this path. It's so bad. I feel like these motorized divisions need to be significantly bigger. They're too small. 15 width is so small. I feel like these need to be like 24 width motorized divisions to give them an incentive. And I feel like this speed one needs to be 20% speed overall, just to create an incentive of an actual fast attacking division. Maybe let's say this focus gives a 20% attack bonus for, let's say, 6 months. So it gives you an incentive to rush attack and do lots of attack damage, but over a very narrow window. 5% for fighters is too little. It's way too little. It should say 5% support equipment's cheaper, 5% artillery is cheaper, and 5% support equipment's cheaper. So basically, it makes loads of different kinds of equipment cheaper. This path is the weakest one I've seen so far. It needs so many buffs. And to be fair, these two focuses need completely erasing because they're so bad. The fact that the German one gives you 20 submarines, this only gives you 10. This path is like really ignored. It's really awful. This one gives 5% attack for special forces, which is okay, not amazing. And this one gives you, is also rubbish as well. Wow. Okay. This one needs to give a buff to attacking terrain, reduces the terrain penalty. Once again, I can't even think what needs to be replaced with this one on this end. Maybe it would, you make submarines 25% cheaper or something. It's the only thing I can think of. And the coastal defense one, maybe it gives just a flat 5% defense for your entire army, just to try something a little bit differently. Imperial Japanese Navy. So the one that's pretty good that everyone seems to be doing at the minute, this gives 2 bicycle divisions. I think you probably can give more, just as like another one of those kind of like fill out the front line style things. Infantry equipment cheaper, 10% recruitable is really good. This one's really good. Reduces terrain penalty reduction by 15%. That's really good too. Imperial Japanese Army is pretty good. The Imperial Japanese Navy, though, on the other hand, gives 100 naval bombers. That's okay. 1 Yamato, that's pretty good. This makes escort efficiency and naval invasion speed plus 10%. This needs to just be like something like 50% faster naval invasion planning. 1 elite marine division. To be fair, this isn't very good either. I think what this would be better is if it gave you like 10 2-width marine divisions, so it kind of incentives you to use this planning bonus in conjunction with this focus to try and spam naval invasions and be really annoying. Basically an air naval invasion shore bombardment style Japan. Yeah. Anyway, guys, this was a lot longer than I expected it to be, but I wanted to talk about the balancing issues in the Speed 5 mod and how the mod can be improved upon. If you want to see more HOI4 content, give this video a go. This one, give it a try. Click.